Okay. Andy Blair, you're looking at him, he's right there. He's a plant-centric ecologist and biologist with more than 20 years of experience in Central Texas plant communities. He holds biology degrees from Mary Hardin Baylor and Texas State University. He works at the Texas Department of Transportation as a biologist. And he lives in New Braunfels with his lovely family. And he enjoys learning and sharing knowledge. Now, topic tonight is grasses for the masses, a look at the evolution of grass and the power that grasses have to bring life back to the land. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Give us a hand
Not have an image on the other screen.
for... It's broken, Kenny, it's broken.
So there's,
If anybody wants to move over to the side so you can see. There's some chairs. There's some chairs, there's empty chairs.
so this side, you guys get to see the presentation. This side is close to the desserts, so there's trade-offs.
Next time, remember your binoculars.
So there'll be some stuff on the slides that for sure you guys won't be able to see, but I'll try to go over things and make it all work out. This is the first time I've given this presentation. I just finished it this week. I did not have a clever subtitle for it yet, so I just left a placeholder there. So after you guys hear the talk, if you have an idea for a clever subtitle, just come let me know. Here we go. So I'm going to trip on this thing.
I know it.
I'm
We
gonna
broke
stand.
down.
I'm going to stand right here so I don't step back and over and trip it. Okay, so when most people think about grasses, they have a pretty narrow idea of what grasses are. They have a little box in their brain that's pretty small, and they've packed all the information they know about grasses, or they think they need to know about grasses, into that little box. And for most people, it's kind of, there's four things you can do with grasses. You can have a lawn. You can use like pampas grass as like an ornamental. You can have a pasture, or you can have your grain crops. Most of our grain crops like corn and wheat and oats and rice are all grasses. They've been domesticated. And so this is kind of what most people think of when they think of grasses. So we're gonna take a little bit deeper dive tonight and kind of break open that box and see what else is in there. So, for lawns, most people think there's just a few species that we use for lawns. They tend to be really high maintenance. They have a lot of, need a lot of water, a lot of fertilizer, all that. In ornamental grasses, we think about the form of the grass over the function. We're not thinking about what that grass is doing in the soil, what it's doing for wildlife. We're just like, it's a piece of lawn furniture, basically. And pastures, most people manage pastures basically as large lawns. So you're still, a lot of times you're having to irrigate. You're applying a lot of fertilizers to try to get as much growth as you can to feed your animals. And then grain crops, we're basically using those to optimize the amount of yield of carbohydrates we can get per acre, and we're optimizing for carbs per acre over every other function, so including nutritional value. Okay, so let's go way back. I always like to kind of zoom out to the outer space level and think about what are grasses and where do they come from. So grasses first show up in the fossil record around 100 million years ago. So kind of right smack dab in the middle of the Cretaceous period. At that time, this part of Texas was mostly underwater in a shallow sea. But if you were to go, a little bit to the north and east of here, there would have been jungles with Acrocanthosaurus and sauropods roaming around, dinosaurs. And the very first grasses, they're flowering plants, so they branched off from the other flowering plants. And they basically were just these small little things that kind of looked like bamboos that lived in the woods, lived in the forests, in the shade. And all throughout the Cretaceous, they diversified a little bit, but they were just kind of, small, unimportant understory plants. Not a big role in any ecosystem back in the Cretaceous. Well, we had about 65 million years ago, a big rock from space came and smashed into the Gulf of Mexico, and just everything, all of the ecosystems on Earth kind of got turned upside down, topsy-turvy. And a lot of dinosaurs and all that went extinct. A lot of plant groups, some of the plant groups went extinct. At that time, it was very warm and wet here. That's part of why this area was all underwater, was because there was no ice really anywhere on Earth. It was all liquid water, and so it was really moist and wet. And so a lot of like tropical jungle type vegetation. And even after the mass explosion, the vegetation that came back was still mostly kind of tropical jungle forest vegetation over most of the Earth where there was land. Around 55 million years ago, so about 10 million years later, we started into this period of global cooling. And it doesn't all happen at once, but from there all the way to the present, it's been getting a little bit cooler, a little bit cooler, a little bit cooler every few million years, and a little bit drier. As it got cooler and drier, you started to get openings in the forest. And the grasses, because there weren't a lot of other plants that were adapted to these openings, the grasses started to move into those. Around 34 million years ago, there was a period of really rapid cooling and drying, and grasses really just diversified and moved out into all those open spaces. And really took off. This is also when they started to develop all their adaptations to being like grazed down and be able to grow back up from the roots, or being burned and then be able to grow back really quickly. And they start all becoming wind pollinated. They have lots of room out there in the open to spread their pollen. Around 10 million years ago, we get the evolution of, in some of the grasses, of this new thing called a C4 pathway. And so what it is it's an adaptation that allows the grasses to be able to continue growing and photosynthesizing when it's really hot and dry. It's a much more efficient pathway for doing photosynthesis whenever it's really hot and dry. And so at that point, you start to have grasses moving into these warmer, more tropical areas, and desert type areas. And then around 2.5 million years ago, we start into this crazy cycle of ice ages. So we kind of been getting cooler, and then about 2.6 million years ago, we hit this just wacky thing where every few, 20 to 100,000 years, we have these rapid cooling and then warming cycles. And so this goes on, and as that happens, the grasses, these grasslands that have emerged as like a new ecosystem, have to kind of move back and forth across North America and other continents, because they're, the ice comes and advances and they kind of move south, and then the ice retreats and they move north. So the last one of those ice ages ended here around 12 to 10,000 years ago. And so the weather that we've had, the climate that we've had for the last 10,000 years has been fairly stable for the most part. And it's been a warm period, and so all those grasses have moved up through Texas, up to the Great Plains, and we had these massive grasslands that went all the way up into Canada. More recently, about 150 years ago, we had people come into this part of the world, and the bison that were here that were helping to maintain that grassland ecosystem were all eradicated in about 20 years, down to just, from 60 million to like 2,000 animals in like a 20-year period. And so that had a massive effect on, those were kind of keystone species for those grasslands. And then by around 1900 to 1915 in Texas, we went through and converted about 99% of all of the blackland prairies, these tall grasslands here, to agriculture. And so there's just, since 1900, there was about 1% left, and since then that 1%'s kind of dwindled, and there's just little pieces of it left. So a lot of the blacklands today, you can't really see this picture good, but there's a lot of degraded land, a lot of soil loss, and all of that. Okay, real quick, you hear the term cool season grasses and warm season grasses. So this is what we're talking about with the C4 pathway. So cool season grasses are these original type grasses. They do really well in cool, moist conditions. If you go up into the upper Midwest, in the growing season, in June, July, August, most of their grasses they have, they'll have some warm season grasses, but those grasslands up there tend to be dominated by the fescues and the bluegrasses, those cool season grasses. They have dense fibrous root systems, and they'll also grow well in kind of moist, shady areas. So we have a lot of cool season grasses here, but they tend to be more, they either grow in the winter here, or they grow down in the stream bottoms under the trees. The C4 grasses, once they evolve that C4 pathway to become much more efficient in hot conditions, they move out into the open in warm places, and so they're really resilient to heat and drought. They tend to have less branched root systems, but deeper, thicker roots. Where the C3 grasses, the cool season grasses, tend to have kind of shallow, bushy roots. These will have roots that'll go down, several feet. And then one of the most important things about them is that they tend to be good partners for our vascular mycorrhizal fungi. And I'm going to say that again, but I'm just going to call them AMFs. Those AMFs are really, really, really important, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So how many grasses are there? Let's go back. Let's take a guess. How many grasses do you guys think there are in the world?
1,000.
Wasn't quick enough.
We cheated.
There's about 10,000. How many grass species do you think there are in Texas?
One.
500. Is that what it says?
Yeah, it's about 570 species in Texas. Yeah, you got it.
Now, how many blades?
Can't get anything right.
You know we're paying attention.
There's about 470 native species of grasses in Texas and about 100 introduced species, non-native. How many of you guys could name 470 native species? How many of you guys could name 100 native grasses? Okay. So there's a lot, right? It's a really big group, a really diverse group. They do a lot of things. Where do they live? What kind of habitats are grasses found in?
Soil.
Everywhere. So they've been, like I said, they've been around for 100 million years. They've colonized a lot of different habitats, including creating their own, this grassland habitat. You find them in woodlands, so down in the floodplains, you find the inland sea oats growing real well down there, the Virginia wilderise. In sunny wetlands, you'll find grasses and sedges mixed together. They grow in deserts. Most of our deserts, actually, in North America, did not look like they do today. 120 years ago, they tend to be desert grasslands, especially the Chihuahuan Desert. Was really like it had grass cover over almost everywhere. So all that bare ground and precept bush is really just the result of overgrazing and not knowing the limits of how many cattle you could put out on that sensitive grassland. And then of course there's grasslands. Okay, so what did our grasslands look like? I want you guys to think of a place somewhere around town that you go to a lot. Close your eyes. We'll do like a little brain exercise here. Close your eyes. Okay, you got the spot? What does it look like? You don't have to tell me, but just think, what does it look like? What kind of plants are there? How tall are they? What are their roots? How deep do you think their roots are? How many different species do you think there are there? Now try to imagine that 150 years ago, or maybe even less, that area was tall grass prairie with switchgrass and big blue stem up over your head and hundreds of different wildflowers that bloomed all throughout the year. Yeah. So I think it's really important. Like, we get so focused on how things are, and we just sort of seem to think that it's just kind of fixed and it's always been that way. But I think it's important to use your imagination and think about what these places were, how they changed over time, and how they could continue to change, and how we can change. Okay, so what do grasses do? one of the main things that grasses do is they produce biomass. They produce plant material, roots, and then they feed a lot of other organisms. I did like a comparison here between, on the same soil type, so like on our blackland clay soils, if you look at a healthy blackland prairie versus a fertilized Bermuda grass pasture, so an improved pasture, or a fertilized St. Augustine lawn, one thing you'll notice, you might not can see this way over here, but one thing you'll notice is that the prairie doesn't require any additional nitrogen or phosphorus, and we'll talk about why that is. These other two treatments are requiring quite a bit of nitrogen and phosphorus to produce plant material. If you look at above ground biomass, the healthy blackland prairie produces maybe a little bit less above ground than the fertilized Bermuda grass pasture, and similar to maybe a little bit more than the fertilized lawn. And you think, okay, well what's the difference? And the difference is below ground. Where a fertilized Bermuda grass pasture will make 4 to 12 tons per acre of biomass, a healthy blackland prairie will make over 100 tons of biomass per acre underground. And so
100 tons.
100 tons per acre.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
in a year.
God.
So that's where the difference is. So when we look at it at grassland, it's like you're seeing like the tip of an iceberg. I like to think of them as like upside down forests. Like 90% of their growth is down and not up. And so we just see this little bit on top because they're adapted to be eaten off and burned and lose that little top. You know, they just get a haircut all the time, but the rest of the body is all down underground. So these native grasslands have little need for added nutrients. We'll talk about why that is. And over time, they improve water infiltration and storage in the soil, which makes them even more drought resilient over time. Okay. Let's talk about AMFs.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a whole talk about AMFs at some point because they're just such bizarre, fascinating, weird alien creatures. There are several different types of mycorrhizal fungi that associate with plants. AMFs are just one of those types. And there's not nearly as many different types of AMFs as there are some of the others. They tend to not be super host specific. They'll kind of get along with just about anybody. But they are these bizarre things. When you see them in the soil, their spores are really big. They're the largest, I think they're some of the largest cells in the world. This is a single cell spore, and you can see it with the naked eye. So they have these big megaspores that live in the soil, and in the spring, when they wake up, they will grow toward, they'll find a plant, and they'll grow toward it and grow into the roots, if the plant accepts it. And then they form this partnership with the plant. So these plants, especially grasses, will give them sugar. So plants make sugar. They'll give 20 to 40% of their sugar to these AMFs. And in return, the AMFs will grow their little hyphae, their little tentacles all the way down in the soil. And they'll get phosphorus is one of the main things they're going after. But other nutrients as well, and minerals. And plants can't actually mine phosphorus from soil very efficiently, and that's why we always have to like feed them and feed them and feed them. But if they have a partnership with these AMFs, they give them sugar, which they always have extra, and then they get back phosphorus in return. And so what happens is you get I didn't talk about the woman either. Another thing that the AMFs do is they produce this glycoprotein coating on the outside of all their little tentacles called glomalin. And this stuff is it's like magic in the soil. It's this really hardy protein that's like, well, it doesn't break down. It lasts for decades in the soil. And so it's one way that a lot of the carbon gets stored in the soil is in the form of these little glomalin. They basically make little tubes as they go along to protect the hyphae. And then when the hyphae die, they're just kind of left behind, and they hold all of those soil particles together in little aggregates. And when you get all those soils held together in aggregates, and you have all these pores that form the soil, and the soil doesn't break apart, and water can just infiltrate it like a sponge. So what you have is the plants will photosynthesize. They'll send their carbon down to the roots. The AMFs will get it. They'll extend their network of little tentacles all down into the soil, into the rock. They'll send back minerals, and they'll produce this glomalin, which will hold the soil together, bind it together, and then produce these soil aggregates. And then when you get rain, it's able to soak through and not destroy the soil, and the soil doesn't compact. It's kind of held open. And so the more rain you get, the healthier the plants are, the more sugar they make, the more AMFs they can grow. And it becomes this positive feedback loop that just makes the habitat better and better and better over time. What else are they up to in the soil? Another really cool thing, some people call AMFs the soil internet. So they have all these millions of tentacles that go all through the soil, and they'll go over to other plants and connect up with other plants. And so they form these like networks between plants. Some plants, like some of the legumes, produce nitrogen they don't produce it, but the bacteria on the roots do. If they have excess nitrogen, they'll trade it across these AMF networks to other plants back and forth. Well, you give me a little bit more phosphorus, I'll give you some more nitrogen.
They're brokering deals.
Yeah, they're broken deals. And the plants will also send messages, like if a plant gets attacked by, herbivores, they'll send like distress messages through these AMFs to other plants so that they can like produce more compounds to fight off herbivores. So they're really, really, really important in the soil. And grasses, especially the big perennial grasses, are the best hosts for them and the ones that really power that whole AMF system. Yes?
I knew that trees could talk like that through fungi, but when did they discover that grasses also do it?
It's all.
This is new stuff, isn't it?
Yes, very, very new. They had, the chemical glomalin was discovered in 1996.
Oh, that's pretty.
It'd been there this whole time, nobody was looking for it. And they didn't understand why some soils held together better than others. They thought it was the plant roots or something else, but it was that protein glomalin. The soil glue.
How do we get that in our soil, like plant ryegrass or something, or?
So ryegrass is a cool
Something.
season grass, and the cool season grasses don't really associate with AMF very
Or
much.
some, well, I don't know what kind.
Who's gonna tell us?
I don't look.
I hope so, I want some AMS, man, I want some.
You can buy AMFs in a bag. There's different ones.
Okay.
But the best ones to get are the ones that are from here. So I would say if you can find a patch of remnant prairie that has like some of those original plants in it, their roots they'll have AMF spores in the roots. So I'm experimenting a little bit right now. We did a little bit of a prairie rescue from this one little spot in New Braunfels that's about to become a housing development, and there's still some of those perennial little blue stem and gay feather and green comet milkweed, some of those perennial prairie plants that have been there for decades. I'm hoping that bringing some of those into my garden and to other projects that we're introducing the AMF fungi with them. So
Can you
Just
say
can't buy it.
the word? Is it glomalin? What do you say?
I
can't read it on the
I
screen.
say glomalin.
How do you spell it?
I've heard some people call it glomalin. It's glomalin. Glomalin.
Sugar daddy.
The other name for the AMFs, they're also called glomeromycota. Glomus is one of the real common genera that you'll see on the bugs in a bag things. Yes.
Well, one of the things we learned about grass a long time ago is the reason why a horse will take a bite of grass and then it'll stop eating that is because if it takes 2 or 3 more bites, the grass starts tasting very bitter.
Yeah.
And that's part of the communication that's going on to stop horses from just eating, they just move on to another clump of grass.
Yeah, and I've watched animals graze, and they'll kind of go and eat in one area, and then they'll move. They'll come over here and they'll eat over here, but they're not. I wonder now that I know that, I wonder if they're like, the ones in that immediate neighborhood are getting the message. So what else do grasses do?
Fascinating.
How do they affect the water cycle? You really can't see this, but it's kind of small, but what I wanted to demonstrate here was on these kind of black land clay soils, what does the infiltration rate look like when you get a big rain? So everybody knows these black soils. You love them or you hate them. Most people hate them. I love them. But they crack open in the summer, right? They get these big, giant cracks that'll, swallow small children. And when you first get a big rain, a lot of water soaks down in those cracks and they seal up, right? And so the infiltration rate for that first 5 or 10 minutes is really high, kind of no matter what. If you have a healthy prairie versus like a improved newgrass pasture, the healthy prairie is still starting from a higher infiltration rate when you start, but the other and the lawn are still, they're still up there. You're going to get some infiltration when those cracks are open. But as soon as they seal within 5 or 10 minutes, the infiltration rate for the lawn drops to almost zero. It just becomes like concrete. And then the Bermuda grass pasture, which has some roots in there, in that upper layer, drops off pretty quickly too. And so, whenever somebody asks you, "Hey, how much rain did you get?" If you have a lawn, you say, "Well, I got 3 inches of rain." But you didn't really get 3 inches of rain, did you? You got maybe a quarter of an inch before that soil sealed up. On an area of tall grass prairie, you got all of it. However much fell, you got all of it, because it was all able to infiltrate and go down in the soil. And so the difference, if you think about how much potential for drought resilience you have, how much potential to produce more forage during the growing season, if you're able to catch all of that water and store it in the soil, you have 10 times more water than your neighbor. So infiltration is important. Water storage is important. Another really cool thing that the plants do for us is they give off water as they grow. So when you get a big rain, if you have more water stored in the soil, you're going to have more water evaporate over time, right? Because there's more there to evaporate before it dries out. And the plants are giving off water as they're metabolizing. And what happens when our bodies give off water? We sweat. And then what happens at the surface of your skin? It gets cooler. And so the same thing happens. The skin of the earth, it sweats between evaporation and transpiration, so they call it evapotranspiration. As that water is given off on a hot day after a rain, it actually cools that surface layer, and it feels cooler than the temperature. That's why whenever we have these rainy years like this, it takes a lot longer before we get up to those 100-degree days, because we still have all this water in the soil and in the plants that's helping cool. It's like nature's air conditioners. Yes?
Will you speak about how to make the soil more easily able to infiltrate the water?
How to make it more easily
Able to infiltrate, is that a process of
you need
making
more
holes in the
variation.
lawn?
You need more grass.
More grass?
So part of it is we need more grasses. So in all of our landscapes, because they're going to send those, especially the warm season grasses, are going to send those roots really deep. They're going to form those relationships with the AMF fungi, and that's what's going to build up soil aggregation, and it's going to build that soil that's more absorbent of water versus repellent, especially in clay soils. One thing you can do, this is what I have clay soils in my backyard. I have a broadfork, which is a big giant steel fork that you can jam in the ground and just kind of pry open little cracks. And it kind of mimics what those soils do when they dry, where you have these big cracks when it rains. If you do that over time, and if you put a little compost, get some organic matter in there, and then you'll be able to hold more water at depth, and it'll allow those roots to grow down faster. So that's one little hack that I've been experimenting with.
That's very smart.
Yeah, I'm going to do a talk on clay at some point too, so we'll talk about how.
Come to the pumpkin decorating contest and we'll make a plan. That's how tonight's, that's how I booked him last year at the pumpkin decorating contest. Tonight. Can you believe that? Scary, isn't it?
The other really cool thing that these grasslands do, everybody learns about the water cycle in school, right? So water evaporates off the ocean, and then it comes over land, and then it falls on the land, and then it runs back down to the ocean, and then it makes a circle, right?
Right.
As people were studying the water cycle, they were trying to like, quantify the water in each of these stages and where it goes, and like they never could get the balance right. It's like there was some missing water. There was extra water inland that they couldn't account for where it came from. And what it is it's evapotranspiration. So when you have healthy ecosystems, when you have healthy grasslands and forests that hold a lot of water and then release it back into the air, they generate more rain. And they generate rain further inland. And so if we didn't have the redwood forests in California generating all of that evapotranspiration, places further inland in California wouldn't get the rain that they get. And they found places where where countries have gone in and cut down all their coastal forests, and then they have areas, 50, 100 miles inland that turn to desert. And so they call it the small water cycle as opposed to the big one. And so if you can actually restore soil health and soil infiltration and water stored in the soil over a large enough area, you can generate more rain locally. There's some ranchers down in Chihuahua, Mexico, that have been doing this regenerative grazing practices between these 4 ranches, they have over 100,000 acres. And within like a 10-year period, they've restored it back to this lush desert grassland, and they now have gotten like 20 to 30% more rain than their neighbors. And even when they're not getting rain, in the summer, whenever it's hot and dry everywhere else, they have clouds. So they have clouds to cool because they're producing so much more water up out of the soil and out of those plants. So you can't do it at a backyard scale. It's not going to affect the weather. But if you did it over, the size of Guadalupe County, you would actually affect the weather locally. What else do grasses do? So grasses are habitat and food for a lot of different animals. Everyone knows about bobwhite quail. I've seen places where people go through and do restore 100 acres of grassland on their land, and they never really heard quail since they were a kid, and all of a sudden they just show up. Have you guys ever been up to the Kirchhoff farm down in Wilson County? They've got quail. They've got a lot of quail down there now. Greater prairie chickens used to be found all up and down the blackland prairies of Texas. There's still some in Oklahoma and further north, and then there's a subspecies, the Atwater's prairie chicken, that's down in a few places along the coastal prairies. But we don't have greater prairie chickens anymore because they have to be in these tall grass prairies that are gone. So they're gone as well. One of my favorite birds to listen to is grasshopper sparrows. These little bitty birds, you don't almost never see them, but they have this really high-pitched song that kind of sounds like a grasshopper, and they're specialists on grasslands and eating grass seeds. Lots of animals. Anybody know about prairie crayfish? So there are crayfish that live not down in the water, but live up in the uplands. And what they do is they burrow down, some of them 10, 12, 15 feet down to the water table. And then they have little water-filled burrows, and then at night they come out and go around and eat insects and plants and graze and then go back in their burrows when it gets hot.
Where do they live?
And so,
Do they live in Texas?
oh yeah, there's several species. If you go up around like Dallas, east of Dallas area, there's a couple species that are just found like within a few county area, and they're in these like remnant blackland prairies and nowhere else. Because we don't really have any remnant blackland prairies here, we're not even sure if we had how many species we had. But there's one, the Southern Plains crayfish here, that is found kind of in uplands as well, and will burrow down. It doesn't burrow as deeply as some of those prairie specialist ones. But this is another really good way, like if you had these They're also digging out holes in that clay and allowing the water to get in and infiltrate and get deeper too, so they can be really important. And bumblebees. Bumblebees actually, besides using all of the flowers and stuff that grow in a prairie area, a lot of times they will build their nests in a clump, like a big clump of grass, and use all that grass thatch as like a little hut. Lots of butterflies and moths. You don't ever see them at night. You know where they go? They go down in little clumps of grass where they can hide. I heard somebody tell me they went through and they had all their ornamental bunch grasses, and in the middle of the year they decided they were going to go in and just weed eat them and trim them all up, and there was just butterfly parks scattered everywhere. They didn't know that all those things use grass for shelter and for little hiding places. Okay, so let's get to know some of our grass neighbors. I'm going to go through several species. It's definitely not an exhaustive list. Like I said, there's 470 native grasses in Texas. I was going to have for you guys a printout that has a much more exhaustive list and gives you like light requirements and water requirements and all that. It's not done, but when I get that done, I'll send that to you guys, and y'all can have that as kind of a guide for if you're trying to pick grasses for different applications, what will work for what.
Okay.
So there's the big five. Some people call it the big four, but I like to make sure that we include eastern gamma in that. So these are the tall grass prairie species that would have been the dominant species out there on the tall grass prairie. They would have been probably 70–80% of all the biomass would have just been those species. And then you'd have had hundreds of other things that were bits and pieces here and there. Little blue stem. This one, you guys have probably seen it. It's the smallest of the big five. It usually only gets about 4 feet tall, 3 or 4 feet tall. Though I have seen some really happy ones that got, in a good year, there may be some that get up, up close to my head. It has this really beautiful, like bluish, silvery blue color in the spring when it comes up. And then during the fall, it turns this kind of reddish color, and then it's red all through the winter. So it's a really interesting color. And it has these really delicate seed heads that are kind of silvery and do weird things with the sunlight that comes through. This is the one of the big five. Most of these are mostly gone from the Blacklands, but I have found little pockets of little blue stem here in the Blacklands. And then if you go over to the sandy lands just to the east of here, there's a lot of areas that were never plowed just because the soil wasn't good for growing crops. And so you can still find areas that are dominated by little blue stem. Indian grass is another one of these big tall grasses. They'll get 5, 6, 7 feet tall. When they seed out in the fall, they have these beautiful golden seed heads. They just look like they're on fire, like at sunset when the sun kind of comes through them sideways. They just kind of glow. They also have kind of a bluish colored leaf, kind of a blue-green. It's really pretty and wider than the little blue stem. So when you pair them together, you can see the difference, but they also kind of rhyme with each other. And the big blue stem is probably my favorite. They also call it turkey foot because it has these flowers, stalks that stick off like toes on a turkey's foot at the tip. So that's how it grows with little blue stem. Sometimes it's hard to tell which one is which until they send up those flower stalks and you see the turkey feet. So that you know those are the big blue stem. But really similar looking to little blue stem, just a little bit larger leaves and a little bit taller plant overall. This is supposedly like the best AMF host of any of the plants on the prairie. And it can have roots that go 14, 16 feet down in places, and they live probably as long as any trees. Really, really cool plant. I have not found any of this for Blacklands here in Guadalupe or Comal or the surrounding counties, but if you go north to Williamson County area, there's still some pockets of big blue stem. And if you go out in the hill country, there's some places out in the hill country where you still can find it. So I've been I've just been trying to collect local seed from as close by as I can to start growing this plant. The other two, the big five, Eastern Gamma Grass. This is a really cool grass. It has this really wide, strap-like, just pure green leaves. It makes a nice big bunch, anywhere from 3 feet across to 3 feet tall to, 5 or 6 feet tall, and then they shoot up these weird seed heads in the summer that can go way up over your head. They have separate male flowers on the end of the inflorescence, and the female flowers that make the seeds are at the base. They kind of look like little pieces of corn. This plant is actually closely related to corn. It's in the same group of plants that corn originated from. This plant is really great because it can grow in full sun out on the prairie. It can grow in full shade in a floodplain in a pecan bottom. A lot of times those pecan bottoms, the dominant understory would just be gamma grass. It can grow, like I said, if it's out on the prairie, they're generally going to be in lower, a little bit moisture areas, but they can also be in areas that get just saturated with water for a while. So really, really versatile. It can do a lot of things. And if you have animals that graze, like this is one of the ones they call ice cream grass. They really love it. It's really nutritious. It's really palatable. The reason a lot of the big blue stem and the Eastern Gamma Grass are gone was because they were delicious. And we didn't understand how to move animals. If you don't move them, then eventually they'll eat all those things till they're gone. That's Eastern Gamma Grass, and then switchgrass. This is one that you still can find it out here on the Blacklands. It's a little bit weedier. It spreads really well from seed. It'll grow in more disturbed soils. It can also take a decent amount of shade or full sun. It can be really, really wet or pretty dry as well. So a really versatile one. I'll say, if you plant switchgrass somewhere, just expect that it's gonna not stay where you put it. It's gonna move around. And that could be a good thing. Just depends on the situation. Some of our
Andy?
yes.
Was that switchgrass showing the little bit of grass at the top and the
Yeah.
roots that are like
So this
down
was,
to,
this is probably 5 or 6 feet of grass on top, and then this is roots.
Yeah.
So 12, 15 feet of roots. And it grows really quickly. Some of it, like the big blue stem takes grows really slow, and it's really hard to establish from seed. This one, you get it going from seed, and I've seen some that had just popped up less than a year old, and I went to dig it and move it, and it had so much root mass that I was just like, I had to like get a grubbing hoe and like dig around, dig around, dig around.
really,
Really, really branchy roots. It's really good for like, if you're trying to restore an area along the side of a creek where it erodes a lot, it'll form those branchy roots real quickly and it'll hold that soil in place. So it's really good for that. Some of our cool season grasses, so if you're trying to get some kind of cover established over the winter, and you're in full sun, one that a lot of people know is native barley. So we have a native species of barley, Hordeum pusillum, that only grows, if it's really happy, maybe a foot tall. But it does really well on, especially clay soils. It does really well on crappy soils. Just bare, like, you're trying to get something going, little barley is good. So it'll come in, it doesn't form it, it's not gonna make it's not gonna be as dense as like ryegrass. But some of the ryegrasses, when you put them in, they'll stay green and they'll kind of shade everything out until about June. And so they're not always compatible with trying to get those warm season grasses established. This one comes in, covers the soil in the winter, and then you can plant your warm season stuff in there, and it's kind of a nurse grass. It'll provide a little bit of shade to keep them moist until they get going, but then it starts to die the second it gets warm. And so it's a good one when we're trying to restore it. I've been using it in my backyard for the areas that the dog tears up. If you have a bigger area, it's kind of similar conditions, really, really disturbed soils. Canada wild rice are really good. It has these big arching kind of wheat-like seed heads, and it just comes up prolifically from seed, grows really fast, gets probably 3 to 4 feet tall, and then by the time we hit June or July, it kind of goes dormant and dies and drops its seed. Though it doesn't, it's a perennial, so it'll come back year after year, where the little bulbs are annual. And then purple freon is a really beautiful grass. I think it should be used more in like as an ornamental grass. It has these beautiful purple seed heads that just kind of like wave in the wind. It looks really nice in like a mass or planted in intermixed with other grasses. It's also super weedy. It'll grow in just really, really crappy, disturbed soils. Not really picky at all.
You said you're a DOT?
Yes.
Don't they put that in like medians?
It is in some of the seed mixes. It's
No, in the median, like Interstate 10 out west.
oh,
I've seen stuff that looks like that, it's just pretty stuff.
it just grows on its own for the most part out there.
Miles.
It loves the sides of highways.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a little bit harder to see this. It has a seed with like 3 little helicopter tails coming off of it. And so those seeds are really hard to get through like a seed drill, or they'll kind of tangle up with each other. So this one's a little, if you're going and trying to spread seed, it's a little easier to broadcast. And it's also hard to find the seed commercially. But the plant's everywhere, so it's not hard to find it. Just throw it out in the pasture. Yes?
I've only taken up the past 5 or 6 years, and that Tech Stops planting, very attractive and very colorful, and would you name besides grasses like this, what else is very common that maybe we could plant in our yards? That you plant along the highway?
Oh, the plant on the highways? I mean, our seed mixes include like little blue stem and Cytox grama and some of these other grasses we'll talk about. Yeah, I would just say, look, when you're trying to find stuff to plant in your yard, look for the grasses that are gonna be right for that condition. So look for the ones that are the right amount of light that you can put in that area, at the right amount of water. Sometimes we put things that are really pretty in a spot and it's not the right spot for them, and then they're just on life support. You know, they just become dependents. So I'm all about trying to find the right plant for the right spot, and no matter what spot you have, there's a grass that will go there. There's probably 10 that would work just well. So it's just learning some of those. And like I said, that handout I give you guys will have kind of more of a breakdown of what does well where, and you can look them up and see which ones you like think would look good in those areas. Some cool season grasses that like shade. These are 3 really cool grasses that nobody really grows. They all do occur around here in kind of shady woodlands and floodplain woodlands. 3-flower milkgrass is all bloomed out right now. They're about 2 to 3 feet tall, and then they have these kind of weird flaggy seed heads that just kind of dangle and hang in the breeze. Melic grass. Yeah, and there's a 2-flower melic grass that's a more eastern species that just barely comes to like I-35 area. And then 3-flower melic grass is the western version of that that's a little bigger, a little bit more drought tolerant.
Spell it M-E-L-C?
M-E-L-I-C grass.
M-E-L-I-C, Melic.
Yeah, Melica nitens. Texas fescue. So we have one native fescue here that grows in this area. It's considered like a rare plant. I think part of it is just because not a lot of people identify grasses and know how common it can be in different areas. This is a really lovely one. I've got some in my yard right now. It has these really delicate arching seed heads that stick up about 3 to 4 feet, and then just kind of dangle. It's sort of similar to, you guys know inland sea oats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of has that same sort of arcing head, but the seeds are a lot smaller and more delicate. And it grows in the spring, whereas the other one grows and flowers later in the year. So this is a cool season grass. And then hairy woodland brome. So you're probably familiar with like cheap brome and rescue grass and some of those non-native bromes that will kind of take over areas. Those are all annual kind of weedy things that are introduced. This is a native perennial brome. The only native perennial brome in this area. It's found all throughout the eastern U.S. In woodlands, floodplains. And it comes just kind of to the I-35 areas about as far west as it goes. I found some in New Braunfels, and I haven't found it west of there yet, so really cool. And they all kind of pair well together. Some more cool season shade grasses. Texas bluegrass. We also have a native bluegrass. Kentucky bluegrass is not actually from Kentucky. But Texas bluegrass is from Texas. It's a perennial grass that sends out runners, like stolons that grow out. So you get one plant and it will just grow and grow and grow and reproduce clonally. It also has separate male and female plants. So if you want seeds, you have to have a male plant and a female plant, and then they'll produce viable seeds. But it never gets more than about 2 feet tall and has these really fluffy, flaggy seed heads that are really pretty in the late spring. And it'll grow out into the sun too, some. It's happiest in kind of that park shade. You get a little afternoon shade, it'll be sunny the rest of the time, it's really happy
How
with that.
about the male and a female plant?
You just have to look at the flowers. The male flowers will have little anthers that dangle from them, and the female flowers won't. If you buy, this is one you can buy it off of Native American Seed as live roots, and I think all of theirs are female. They're all one or the other. I can't remember which one it is, so you just have to find somebody else that has it. Or find somebody who does. Okay, I'm showing you some of it here because I threw in a couple of sedges. So I'm cheating. I threw in a couple of sedges. Sedges are not grasses. Sedges have edges. Grasses are round. But functionally, they're related to grasses. You can use them in the same way you would use grasses. So these are two of my favorite sedges for shady areas around here. Cherokee sedge has these kind of arcing seed heads. You're kind of seeing a pattern here. A lot of these shady ones have these similar form. And Cherokee sedge gets maybe 2.5, maybe 3 feet if it's real happy. It's a pretty big, bunchy looking sedge. Nice and green all through the year. They'll bloom in the spring. They're blooming right now. And then Eastern woodland sedge is kind of a smaller version of that one. It doesn't have the big giant arching seed heads. The seed heads are a little smaller. But the whole plant is this really nice dark green, kind of thick strap-like leaves, and it only gets about 1 foot tall, maybe 1.5 feet. So it's good for a little bit smaller area. And you can mix it in with some of these other grasses. You can mix it in with some of the spring blooming flowers, like golden groundsel and things like that. Fireleaf sage, cedar sage. It does really well in the same kind of habitats. Some warm season grasses that like shade. So one of my favorite grasses, I may have told you guys about it, is rusty seed passible. It's a grass that grows it's probably in half of your yards, and you just don't even know it. Has these kind of wide, really light, almost lime green leaves. The seed heads are not really spectacular at all. They're kind of little small, delicate little seed heads. The great thing about this grass is it grows really well in dry shade. Like under a big oak tree where it doesn't get a lot of, out in the open, doesn't get a lot of water off the roof or anything, it'll do just fine. But if it's in an area that gets a lot of water, it'll also do just fine.
Oh,
It's not super picky. You can mow it, and it'll just kind of lay down flat real low. It'll make a nice little mowed ground cover. If you don't mow it, it only gets about 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall, and it's a happy little bunch. It mixes well with other plants. So really, really versatile plant. Absolutely nobody sells the seed, so you just have to find some and sprinkle it out from seed, but it does come up pretty easily from seed. Purple top tridents, sometimes just called purple top, is one that also will grow in full sun to full shade, really versatile in terms of its light requirements. It likes a little bit more moisture, but it doesn't want to be wet. So if it's in the shade, it can go pretty dry. If it's in the sun, it wants a little bit more moisture. It would do well in the same kind of conditions like eastern gamma grass. The star here is these seed heads that pop up in the fall. They're very large, and they're purple, and they're all dangling and hanging in the wind. Just look really, really beautiful. Gives you some color and some motion in your landscape to have those up in the fall. And then southwestern bristlegrass. This is one of all of the bristlegrasses are really good bird food. They have these big grain-like seeds that birds like to eat, and this one has some of the biggest ones. This is a really, really tough plant. It grows from central Texas all the way out to the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. And it prefers to be in the shade, but it doesn't have to be in full shade. If it's got a couple of hours of shade a day in the afternoon, it's gonna be just happy. And so for some of those areas that are maybe a little bit too sunny for some of the other things, this will be fine there. Gets a little taller with the seed heads. It's maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, a little bit bigger, more robust plant, and also one that will spread pretty quickly by seed too. So don't put it in like a small full garden. It's gonna want some room to get its elbows out a little bit. But the birds will take it. Here's 3 more that are good bird seed plants. These are all warm season plants that grow in the sun, that are really easy to establish from seed. And I think all 3 of these are commercially available at some of the time. Silex grama, our state grass of Texas, if you guys didn't know that. This is probably the most widespread naturally occurring grass maybe in the world. It goes from like Saskatchewan in Canada all the way down through Mexico, Central America, all the way down to southern Argentina. So all of the middle parts of North and South America.
So it's a drug group.
So it's smoking grass, in other words.
Yeah, it's super easy to establish from seed. Grows really quickly, covers the area really quickly. This is one of the ones when it goes into TxDOT seed mix, nothing else comes up, but the side ups comes up. It's that tough. It'll get, if they're in a really dry area, they'll only get maybe 1.5 foot tall, and then the seed heads maybe another 6 inches of that. But if they're in an area where they're really happy and good healthy soil, they'll get 3-4 feet tall with the seed head sticking up. So they'll vary quite a bit in size, just depending on the conditions. This is one you could almost mow it if you only mowed it a couple times a year and kept the mower hyped pretty high. You could even have it in like more of like a meadow area that you mow a few times a year, and it would do okay with that. So same thing, Texas cutgrass, similar size and shape. The difference here is the seeds. They have these alternating little clumps of seeds on either side of the stalk going up. This is one of the, if you ever see painted buntings out, like landing on grass and pinning it to the ground and eating it, this is one of their favorite things to go after. A lot of old little seed-eating birds love the cutgrass. It's super easy to establish from seed. This is one that just kind of more recently has become available commercially. But I would encourage everybody, like, this plant is super easy to grow. It grows in almost any kind of soil. And it's just a lovely little plant. Just if you need some little bunch grasses to fill in an area, it's got a nice kind of form to it. And then tall dropseed is another one of my favorites. You'll see this growing on the roadsides where most of the other native grasses are gone. And there's just like King Ranch blue stem. This is one of the grasses that will still be left usually. It has these really thin, wispy, hair-like leaves. And it makes a bunch anywhere from 2 to 3 feet wide and about 1.5 foot tall. The seed heads are kind of thin and wispy. Most of the seeds are hidden in these little sheets. And so it'll actually hold its seeds, it'll hold onto a lot of its seeds during the winter. And it's a source of seed for birds in the winter when all other seeds have fallen off. They have them kind of protected in these little sheets, and the birds will go and find them in. So the name's kind of, it's called tall dropseed. It doesn't get that tall.
Andy, those 3 seeds right there are in a bird seed mix for Texas. It's a Texas bird seed.
Yeah.
And all 3 of those are in that. I just read it yesterday.
Yeah, as they should be. Those are all really important ones. Some more really easy ones to grow from seed. That are warm season grasses. We've got all the silver blue stems. There's a lot of, I don't know how many species there are. There's at least 3 in this area. They all look about the same. You have to kind of get the microscope out and look at the seeds and get a key. And I just don't usually have the patience for that, so I just call it Ochreochloa spud. It's one of the silver blue stems. They're actually related to the old world blue stems, like King Ranch blue stem and Clayburgh blue stem. And so they grow they're kind of more weedy. They'll grow in really disturbed soils. They're not as reliant on the AMF fungi to be there for them to grow well. And so they're really good for areas where you're trying to get something established. And then the seed heads are really kind of these fluffy white puffs that are kind of, I think they're kind of beautiful. Rough tridents. You could almost grow this on asphalt. This stuff is so tough. I'll find it growing out of areas just like rocky gravel areas where there's no other grasses but just the rough tridents. And it's about the same size and shape as side oats grama, maybe not quite as robust of leaves because it's usually growing in a parking lot. But the seed heads are kind of similar to the side oat seed head. Kind of these long spikes. And then white tridents. This is a really good one for any areas that hold water for a while. This plant can be submerged underwater for a week or two at a time and then dry out completely bone dry for months at a time, and it's just like perfectly happy. It prefers clayey soils. It doesn't grow as well on like sandy soils that drain really well. So if you've got areas with really poor drainage, you get that low spot that it's just kind of, nothing really works really well there. White tridents is really good. It also produces seeds that are good bird food as well. And my name for this grass is cucumber grass, because if you take and pull the little seed heads before the seed stalks before they start to dry out, you can chew on the end and it tastes like cucumber.
Get out.
Try it.
Shouldn't have said that, Andy. Everybody now be Guadalupe County looking for that.
Oh, it's on the sides of the roads everywhere. So if you look at the roadside ditches, you have like the front slope by the road, the back slope by the fence, and then you have the ditch part.
Yeah,
It's always growing in the ditch.
really.
So, because it likes that area where it just ponds water.
It's wet.
Some warm season short grasses. So you can buy there's different mixes of like blue grama, buffalo grass, curly mesquite that they sell as like a lawn alternative or a native lawn alternative. And those are great. What I like to do is mix and match other small things in there with those. So in my yard right now, I've got buffalo grass, I've got curly mesquite, I've got some windmill grasses, and I've just put in some Texas grama. So these are all really short grasses, warm season grasses. The buffalo grass and the curly mesquite will reproduce by runners, kind of like the way Bermuda grass does, just not as aggressively. The windmill grass and the grommas are little small bunch grasses. And they all do really well on kind of disturbed soils. So I was doing the little barley in the winter and then putting these out in the fall as well so they can come up in the spring. And there's more than 3 species of windmill grass here, but there's 3 species that are really common in yards and roadsides, and they all hybridize with each other. And so you don't almost always have like a pure population, but they're all pretty recognizable. They have these kind of like fingers on a hand, or like fireworks going off. These little, my wife calls them helicopter grass. These look like little helicopter propellers with little seeds all along them. And then the Texas grama kind of looks like a miniature version of side oats grama, except it's shorter, the seed heads are shorter, and the individual seeds are bigger, and they kind of stick off both sides of the seed stalk versus all on one side like side oats. Otherwise, it looks a little bit like a miniature side oats plant. Okay, so in conclusion, we need more masses of grasses. So be thinking about how, at a residential scale, how can you incorporate more grasses into your landscapes, into your ground covers, into, if you have a lawn that's just, a mowed area with 1 species of grass, can you make it 4 species of grass? Can you add in a few wildflowers? Can you add a little bit of diversity in there? If you have like perennial plants planted, can you mix some grasses in there because it's going to improve the soil and make all of those plants healthier and provide habitat for all the little creatures and critters that like to get down and hide in those clumps of grass. What can we do on public lands. So I'm interested in like trying to partner with like the city of New Braunfels Parks and Rec Department on this new park they're putting in on the northwest side. They want to do blackland prairie restoration on parts of it and have like showcase those kind of areas. So there's all kinds of opportunities to add grasses and then all those benefits that trickle down from that. If you have land, if you've got animals, if you've got farm and ranch, how can you incorporate more native grasses into your grazing rotation? It's going to improve the soil conditions, it's going to improve infiltration and the health of those grasses, which is going to improve the health of the animals as well. And then think, you know, you can't do anything at the big scale, but I think back to those ranchers in Chihuahua that, you know, they started partnering, like talking with each other, and over a large enough area, they were able to improve enough land to increase their rainfall. And so, like, if you can, you know, it's not going to happen in a year or a decade, but over time, if you're thinking a little bit bigger picture down the road, you know, this whole region could improve to the point where the rainfall is more reliable and less of these like feast or famine kind of things. So, and whatever you're doing, there's a grass for that. So pretty much any kind of project where you can put a plant, there's grasses that will fit that situation. So yes.
So what happens in a dust bowl situation where there's just no grass? What causes that? Easy question.
Yeah, the Dust Bowl that we had in the early part of the 20th century happened whenever they went through and plowed up all of the prairies and planted them mostly to wheat.
That was man-made.
And part of that was all of that evapotranspiration that created all that rainfall and kept all the rainfall in the middle of the country came from those prairies, from those soils. And once they only had wheat on them in the winter and then were dry the rest of the year, they didn't get their summer rainfall, so it was like a man-created drought. Man-made drought.
Didn't have all those roots holding the soil.
Yeah, I think about the drought we've had in the hill country the last few years, and I think a lot of it is really just land use. If we could improve our land use, I think we would have less of these long dry periods with devastating storms.
So if you got any that will crowd out Bermuda grass or St. Augustine, because I hate both of those.
It's a little bit difficult to crowd out because they're so good at crowding.
Yeah.
What I've done with that patch of Bermuda grass I had was I solarized it over the summer, and then I came in and I put down, you know, a couple inches of topsoil and compost on top of that, and then planted my grass into that. And I had a few still pop up there, and I just pulled them in. I got them under control. It wasn't a huge area. I've also done areas where I put down cardboard lasagna. So cardboard and compost, and then soil, and then plant on top of that. And I think you can bury them deep enough under there where they're not going to come up through. The nutsedge is a true story, but I've been able to bury Bermuda grass or St. Augustine that way.
Did I hear you say that for your warm season short grasses seed, did you put them out in the fall? Did I hear you say that?
Yeah,
So
I
like
put them out in the fall. You can put them out in the spring as well.
Okay,
You can kind of put them out any time of year, but
okay, it doesn't have to be just spring.
it doesn't have to be just spring. Yeah, I just put all mine out in the fall, so I didn't have to do it twice because it was all kind of a bare area. And they'll come up when they're ready. Yes.
Okay, so you talked about the native grasses, now let's talk about the bad grasses. Now, you mentioned KR bluestem, that's a non-native, introduced invasive species. And I see a lot of it along the roadways. And that's because TxDOT introduced it, right? I'm blaming you and TxDOT for KR.
I would say
But you weren't there, it's been around, KR bluestem's been around.
it hasn't been in the TxDOT seed specs in 20 years or so, but
What's that?
I said it hasn't been in the TxDOT seed spec in 20 years or so, but it used to be in there.
Yeah, it was in there because y'all got smart. Okay, what about Johnson grass? Because I see that a lot on the side of the road too.
That's not planted by anybody. It was brought over and used as an erosion control back when they were, during the Dust Bowl years when they were trying to like find some way to stop all this erosion they'd started. They
Yeah.
were just kind of throwing everything at the wall. That plant is just so easy to establish that anytime you have equipment that's moving from site to site, it gets moved around.
Yeah. I mean, me and my grandpa used to cut it on the side of the highway, so
Yeah.
I just assume TxDOT might have something to do with that.
Not that I know of. It's never been something that we've.
But it's a non-native invasive, it's not good.
Anything that you go and tear up, Johnson.
The other one, two more I want to mention is, I call it poverty weed or Roosevelt weed.
Mhm.
It was introduced during the Dust Bowl. What's the technical term?
It's a native shrub that was found here that once all that land was bare and nothing would grow on it, it just took off. So it does really well. It's a pioneer species. And so it comes in these areas where there's not any cover and grows and proliferates.
And that's the weed that preachers have a big problem with over on Preach Prairie
Yeah.
in Floresville. Getting rid of that's very expensive
Yeah.
too, by the way. And the last thing is, I've noticed some clumps of dark green grass called guinea grass.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna blame TxDOT for that one, but guinea grass is really bad. Can you tell us about guinea grass and how to get rid of it?
Guinea grass was brought over from Africa to, I think, some of the ranches down in South Texas. Again, it really likes disturbed, bare soil. It also does really well in like the shade, and so it tends to grow up into like, you get these like mesquite shrubland areas, and it'll just grow up into them and just completely fill the understory. It gets like 10 feet tall.
It's
Grows-
super bad. And
Grows really fast, makes a bunch of seeds, spreads really quickly.
We have a lot of it in DeWitt County, and I think you mentioned Goliad County.
It's
We
been
have a lot of
moving.
guinea grass there, but it just showed up here in Wilson County on my 200-acre strip.
I've
And,
started noticing it in
I
like,
need to get rid of it.
in this area in the last like 5 years.
So I need volunteers and hose to chop that stuff out.
It looks a little bit like switchgrass too, so you kind of have to look at the two together and see which one you have.
Don't forget everybody, gardener's favorite grass, nutgrass.
Nutgrass, yeah, there's actually a sedge.
That's a sedge.
Yeah, that's one that grows by all the little runners underground. My goal with those is I'm just gonna get all my other grasses so happy and healthy that they're gonna shade it out eventually, maybe. We'll see. All right.
Well,
Any other
do
questions?
you think that maybe this guy knows a lot about grass?